Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello and welcome to the 24th module in the series Marketing Management, a VUCA perspective. We are discussing fundamentals and I am your friend and tour guide Siddhi Prad Bhattacharya. We've discussed a lot about market factors. We have talked about external forces, VUCA environments. We have also talked a lot about consumers and how research is one of the best tools that helps you ward off any potential threats. As we go further into the understanding of marketing management as a subject, the first thing that comes to mind is how has this been applied? We've been discussing cases as well to that particular effect. This time around, we have another case study for you, which will get you to speed when it comes to understanding how interacting with market forces works well for any organization. Let's begin with the words of Andrew Gary. He is the ex-CMO of Huawei, runs a CMO school now. And he says, innovation is whatever brings value to the customer or consumer. It takes many forms. Sometimes it's a breakthrough in technology and sometimes it's just about thinking different in the way we approach problems. With that in mind, let's get into reading market responses and how an organization deals with shifting market forces. Brands that succeed always have an ear on developing scenarios to stay on top of their game. And this is precisely where we bring in today's market response case study. We are talking about one of the largest and most favored e-tailers in India, Flipkart. India's e-commerce space today is mainly dominated and defined by two players. One is the homegrown Flipkart and the other being the international Amazon. Flipkart is the fashion leader, and after the acquisition of Myntra and Jabong, Flipkart commands more than 2/3 of India's fast-growing online fashion market. Amazon is the tech power and they have established this fairly well across their gamut of services. Over 20 years of learnings in technology and online retail business has resulted in faster execution and fewer mistakes. Amazon excels in providing powerful search and recommendation engines to users, and this is where the fight for Flipkart has been. They were earlier in the market, but they took on the might of Amazon. India's apparel and lifestyle market is where they actually made their bigger foray as the time passed. And that particular lifestyle market is worth about $70 billion and currently only 2% of that is really online. According to a recent Google report, the sector is expected to scale up to 35 billion by 2020. This is the time when this particular report was created, and it has obviously outstripped that particular mark by now, growing at 4 times in the coming years. And we've been seeing that despite the COVID scenario and given today's geopolitical scenarios which are evolving, we are seeing the lifestyle, the textile and the garments market take an unprecedented upsurge in India's context. The report also stated that fashion will outstrip consumer electronics as the largest online retail category, which already it has, and it accounts for about 35% of consumers' total online spending by 2020. This has already been something which we have seen achieved by the e-tailing segment in India. And this successful journey which was traversed by Flipkart is what we bring to you today, and it shows how it read the signs of the market and reacted to it in time. So India's e-commerce scenario, the rise of Flipkart, is where we begin our journey today. Flipkart started with a certain set of challenges and opportunities which it outlined and identified and then reacted to it, obviously. Now for India's market, the challenges for Flipkart were that India is a multilingual, vast nation with diverse demographics. Obviously, things change every 200 kilometers. cuisines, languages, and what have you. Weak infrastructure which prevailed at that point in time when Flipkart was starting off, and there were large amount of bureaucratic hurdles which was not allowing it to grow and foster its growth at a pace which it would have liked. There was a general distrust in merchants, and the retail segment itself was quite fragmented and it was dominated more by mom and pop stores. So people typically walked into a store for the first time, they found something which was to their liking, they developed trust over multiple purchases, and so therefore they decided to favor that one particular shop. This was typically the case during the license Raj and thereafter when the globalization wave hit India. But even so, e-tailing was not something which had picked up very highly. The opportunities that Flipkart found were that there was poor service in a traditional retail format, and this was the gap that they first and foremost highlighted themselves to be able to cater to. The second part was e-commerce was nascent and growing at that point in time, and the potential when they started this off in India's market in 2007 was immense. They wanted to be the first movers and wanted to garner both brand trust as well as market share in that particular space. In terms of innovation, they introduced something which was most comforting to the Indian consumer. This was the cash on delivery system, because Indians like to pay only when they have sampled that particular item. So this was typically what prodded Flipkart's movement towards the cash on delivery system, and this found a lot of favor with consumers who were otherwise wary of paying online, and even at that point in time, paying online was not so much a done deal. People would rather get the service done at their homestead, look at the product and then pay for it when they were satisfied that what they were getting was precisely what they had ordered for. And this also was supported well by full refund policies and reliable logistics, notwithstanding the fact that at times bricks have landed up, soap bars have landed up at people's places instead of what they ordered for when it came to electronics and such like. A lot of times logistics have failed, but over time this has improved and improved drastically. So initial troubles which were faced by e-tailers have been actually circumvented as time has passed along. This is also part of that particular structure where the logistics fails were always recorded and worked upon, and that's why Flipkart jumped the particular queue and reached out in top when it came to e-tailers in India. Key innovations that Flipkart brought about and which spurred its growth in the entire marketplace are captured here in a way. Unlike the West, India had low credit card usage and people would pay for whatever they had in their pockets, typically cash, because digitally we weren't making too many payments at that point in time. So paying upfront in notes was something which would work best with the Indian audience at that point in time, and that is why the cash on delivery format also worked very well. Partnerships were taken up by Flipkart like Mumbai's Dabbawalas. For those who are unaware, Dabbawalas are iconic in the space of logistics in the Indian scenario. In Mumbai, housewives make food and pack them in designed tins which are carried by the Dabbawalas from homesteads to offices for the working population. This is typically a very well accepted format across Mumbai, and the whole premise is based on timely and precise delivery. So much so that the Dabbawala's unique system, which was not devised by any Harvard or Yale or Ivy School League grad, is something which actually beat even Six Sigma expectations. So things like that made the Dabbawalas an excellent choice when it came to partnering at the initial phase for delivery and logistics support. They also set up something called eCart, which was their logistics arm in 2009 to support the entire system as their entire outreach grew, and the number of places that they would service also were growing as they moved into the hinterland of India. Then they also set up third-party seller platforms and expanded the product categories. Remember that Flipkart, much like Amazon, had started with selling books. So books were easy because they were exactly printed and then shipped across the form factor and size and weight and the kind of item being shipped across was something which was to be expected. And so it was very formatted in that particular sense. As their product categories grew, they got toys, they got other things which were of household usage, then they got FMCG goods, they got consumer durables, and they also got fashion. So with all these aspects coming into play, Flipkart expanded its product categories, and with the acquisition of Myntra and Jabong, they really made that large quantum jump and became market leaders when it came to the fashion aspect of e-tail in India. Here, there are certain parts which we need to understand in terms of their growth and market leadership journey. In 2011, their sales reached $100 million and they expanded, like we were speaking of, into electronics, sports, baby goods and many much other product lines. And by 2014 to 2016, they had acquired Myntra and Jabong, and they instantly captured 60 to 70% of fashion e-commerce as a market space. So this gave them the necessary and instant shot in the arm which we discussed. And by that time, they had also put into place liberal return policies so that the consumer was never felt that they've been waylaid by the brand. Other aspects that helped them cement their foothold was free shipping, and this also helped boost consumer trust. Now, in terms of competition and market dynamics, by 2013, Amazon India had already launched with a third-party marketplace model. So they were already in the fray in India, and they were doing a certain decent amount of business and giving tough competition to Flipkart. There was intense competition which spurred innovation, both in terms of service and in terms of what the consumer would get as a user experience. Consolidation of the variety we've spoken about in terms of product categories, in terms of mergers and acquisitions, helped strengthen Flipkart's position as India's leading e-commerce platform. They also continuously had a consumer-centric approach. They understood the pulse of the Indian consumer very, very well. Because of this, they were driven by what market forces were, and that definitely came from consumer demands for choice, for service, and for the value that they could get out of that e-tail. And they constantly believed in the adage that companies constantly innovate to stay competitive, and they were always matching their other larger competitor, Amazon, toe to toe. Stuart Ames has said in this particular regard that if you do not evolve, you end up not being around. So it was definitely an existential crisis for Flipkart, and in order to be relevant, in order to exist, and in order to hold their own, to grab the market share and keep it within their territory, they had to constantly innovate. Through this, we come to the point where we see how business value was getting enhanced by Flipkart in their actions. In terms of the shift, they moved from an inventory to a marketplace model, which meant that they, instead of stocking at their own end, they were becoming a marketplace, an aggregator for third-party brands to participate on. In this marketplace model, they had independent merchants who were selling directly to shoppers. What they provided was a solution in terms of high logistics costs and inventory challenges, which was what they wanted to circumvent. What they actually then did was come up with a hybrid model where online stores were prepared, which added selective physical presence, and that helped them counter what Amazon had already been started doing, which was their brick and mortar service store in New York. Yes, they hadn't come to India, but that particular aspect already implied that there could be these moves within India, and India was a fairly large market. So it already made sense for Amazon to try and do that kind of foray in India, and expecting certain forays like that, they had their hybrid model well in place by that time. So they got Pepperfry and Lenskart, which were already exploring offline stores in India, and that prodded them to think of that hybrid model themselves. Pepperfry was doing furniture, whereas Lenskart was doing spectacle frames and vision glasses as well as sunglasses. Now, in terms of their fashion, e-commerce and online ventures, they found a lot of success with the brands that they picked up on the go. So here, if you see, there was one particular brand of interest, Myntra, which is even doing roaring success today, and they had a lot of success with their Roadster value, which had sales of about 600 crore rupees in 2017, and it was projected to grow to about 1,000 crores by 2019. With this particular brand, they opened its first retail store in Bangalore in March of 2017 with that particular objective in mind. Now, e-commerce players adopting offline strategies was now becoming commonplace to grow their revenue streams. Why is this important? First and foremost, you see Indian consumers, the way they think and the way they react to certain items that they want to purchase, especially if you are going to mid-ticket to high-end purchases. In this scenario, what Indian consumers typically want is touch and feel, which means they want to sample the product, they want to feel the form factor, they want to know where they are spending, because by then purchasing online, although was growing in urban areas, hadn't really percolated that much to hinterland India. And a lot of people migrated from hinterland India and joined the workforce in urban areas. So the growth in trust was happening slowly and over time. So the reason behind why e-commerce players were now adopting a hybrid aspect where they brought in offline stores as well is because when it came to mid-ticket to high-end purchases, Indian consumers wanted something which we refer to as touch and feel. This was important because a lot of Indian consumers, although urban in nature, were already buying from online stores. People were moving from the hinterland of India and moving to these urban centers. And their entire aspect of purchasing something online was a new experience, and they wanted to have that particular satisfaction that whatever they are paying for is something they are genuinely receiving in kind, which means they wanted to touch, feel, smell, taste and do any amount of sensorial experiences before they actually decided that it was something they found worth buying. Also, the fact that you had an online and an offline presence meant your visibility grew higher, and when you had an offline presence, you automatically established that as a brand you were a serious large player which could afford that kind of real estate. So which meant that organizations were backing whatever they were trying to sell, and consumers had the trust factor going up because they could now actually walk into a store, get the full store experience also alongside what they purchased online. So because of this, both things worked in tandem and built the consumer trust when it came to buying from the larger marketplace brand, which was in this case an online store like Myntra. In this case, there were also a lot of high costs because in order to keep consumers attracted towards their particular brand and marketplace, you always had to, in order to get the share of wallet from the customers, it was directly proportional to the share of voice that you could generate, which meant there was a lot of advertising which was happening. All of the advertising was happening primarily either on electronic or digital media formats. Flipkart's typical burn would be about $40 to $50 million per month as of 2017. This was a very high-end burn, but yes, it was also oriented towards affecting sales because they were running a lot of sales which were attracting consumers in hordes, and they had a lot of product lines to actually display and get sale conversions happening at that point in time. These aggressive marketing campaigns were many and started something called the Big Sale in October 2016. From there on, both Amazon as well as Flipkart have had their annual sale mega days, and this has now expanded into a lot of smaller festive sales happening throughout the year, with the inclusion of Black Friday, which was an international feature, which has now also started being showcased in India. Now, in terms of cost reduction measures, they lowered their burn rate by 5 to 10% each quarter in 2016, but they also ensured that their brand visibility was still intact. And their plan was to save about $150 to $200 million by the December of 2017. What they did that helped them was they reallocated Myntra's budget to Flipkart, and they countered Amazon through that, because their acquisition had brought funds to their kitty. With that larger kitty, they actually started buttressing their marketing campaigns when it came to the larger behemoth which was countering them, Amazon in this case. Now, they had multiple challenges, and in order to completely be able to run on top of all these challenges, they had to take them all at the same point in time. Here, in terms of competition and investment challenges, Flipkart started streamlining its operations, and they had planned a Walmart investment of about $1 billion, making them one of the first companies to be able to raise that kind of money. The second was Amazon at that point in time pledged another additional $3 billion in 2016, making it a total of $5 billion in their investment in India, and this was significantly threatening to Flipkart's market dominance, which at that point in time it enjoyed. Now, in terms of logistics and last mile connectivity, this was the actual core of the entire delivery service, and hence they had to ensure that they kept their edge there. This is where e-cart, which we've spoken of before, this was their logistics arm, and this became the backbone of the entire operations for Flipkart. This ensured that the deliveries they made were done now even to other remote areas. So, hinterland, from metros, they moved to tier 1 cities, to tier 2 cities, to tier 3 cities, and now they were touching suburban and even borderline rural areas. They were monetized to offer warehousing and supply chain services to third party clients, so that they got nodal centers and worked with a hub and spoke model. So, when you work with a hub and spoke model, you have a central hub which is defined in one particular geography, which caters to a certain catchment area around it, with nodal centers around its particular hub, so that you can transfer goods to these nodal centers, and these create the spokes through which the entire logistics gets better managed for the larger parent company. Now, these spokes would also work reverse when it came to the collections aspect, because they were the people who were actually bringing the cash back. And remember that a lot of the interaction still was cash on demand, and this was even more so when it came to the hinterland India, because again digital payments adoption was not yet that big a thing in India. Some things were actually going to move things in their favor as time passed, but that is for a later part in the story. Now, let's look at integrating fashion and new business models. When they decided that fashion would be one of the core categories that they would focus on, and their acquisitions of Myntra and Jabong came into market, they total in all combined about 45% market share in fashion e-commerce. Here, they integrated their back-end operations to get better efficiency going for them, and consolidated private label portfolios to enhance businesses. What are private labels? If you are a retailer and you are stocking products from brand A, brand B, and so forth, you can launch a brand which is your own, which you launch and stock under your store location, and they are similar in build, similar in form factor to what the branded products are being sold as. The only thing is that since you are manufacturing them, you price it lower. And you typically don't advertise these, but since you are owner of that particular marketplace, you showcase these better and you give the audience a chance to compare and purchase basis purely on price. And another bigger feature for this is you put in a recommendation from the marketplace. So when you put the marketplace recommendation, it seems because you've gained trust and brand value yourself as a retailer, if you are recommending something which is your choice to consumers, at times because people are likely to pick things from you because you have obviously created a certain amount of trust and faith with consumers, they will also want to pick up things that you have recommended if they find the price and the value offering to be something which they feel it is worthwhile. Now here, with their inclusion, they started also looking at proper segments of the market which they could target separately. Now when it came to Jabong, women were the primary targets. They were looking for first time shoppers and the focus was primarily towards North and East India. So that automatically meant the kind of models who were featured, the kind of lines of clothing which were again showcased, the kind of pricing which was there, the occasions on which it was marketed. All of these things kept that particular flavor going. And for Myntra, initially it was men, affluent consumers, people who would easily part with that kind of money, and these would be the higher end products as well. And the focus was towards South and West India. Why? Because in the southern part of India, IT was a big booming industry and people had money from the affluence of being in IT because a lot of IT centers were established down south, which included Bangalore, which included Hyderabad and Chennai. And in Western India, because a lot of money was being handled out of Bombay and its nearby areas in catchment Maharashtra as well as Gujarat, a lot of people had the money to spare and wanted to get into buying fashion from that side of the country. Now, in terms of defining their platforms, they had clearly got consumer facing platforms and remained independent so that they could cater to diverse segments. When you look at a Myntra website, you do not realize that it comes from the house of Flipkart. Same thing for Jabong. So the intent here was to have multiple storefronts from which differentiated product purchases could be gotten into without having to think of it too much. And as they went along, their entire business model also kept evolving when it came to e-commerce transactions. They shifted towards the hybrid models for better market penetration. Hybrid we've already told, and you know how it is between both online and offline factors being managed together. And the constant focus was cost efficiency and excellent logistics because these were critical for their success. So these were always going to be the key drivers, the key success factors. And strategically, they integrated and kept their innovations going to stay competitive amidst fierce rivalry. You know who you are up against, Amazon, which is the biggest shark in the water. With these things in mind, you obviously want to keep your eye on market share versus profits. So in terms of market share versus profits, Flipkart's strategy was always addressing consumer affordability because they would sell in that kind of numbers so that people who found the products affordable would always head towards their particular platform to buy their stuff. Low interest monthly payment plans were introduced so that people could access products buy now and keep paying over a certain period of time. Also, they introduced a concept of Flipkart Assured, which means that a certain amount of quality checks were already done, and this gave consumers or prospects another reason to buy certain recommended products. We've already discussed how private labels were recommended, and certain brands which wanted to feature their particular products would pay a little premium to Flipkart to put that particular Flipkart Assured check on their product lines. This came obviously with those stringent quality checks. It was not just that you paid and you got that particular tag, but the fact that it was a symbiotic relationship between the seller, the marketplace, and at the end of the consumer as well, because the consumer was also expecting a certain amount of quality, which is why they would trust that Flipkart assured badge. Now here exclusive partnerships were also forged and you had exchange programs. So for example, you had smartphones. Now if you've got a smartphone which has become old, you put that phone back in for an exchange, and for the valuation of that particular smartphone, you can buy a certain new one with a certain discount off because you've traded your particular older piece in. And again, in terms of fashion, they had focus on own brand products because the private labels obviously gave higher margins. You did not have to advertise them. You were a store, and inside of your store, you could promote your products, bring them out to the fore, help compare them with other bigger brands, and always keep the margin higher, because here advertising costs were absolutely negligible or non-existent. Now they also got this private label unit to expand and become a robust entity unto itself. Amazon did it very well with Amazon Basics. They launched with electronics in September 2015. Solimo for home and kitchen early 2016. Mix and Symbol as late as 2016 for fashion. Now here this competition was actually something which Flipkart had to tend to. This was a raging fire for them, and so therefore the strategic value proposition was that it reduced the costs in the value chain because it was sourced internally and no extra advertising margin was required, and gave to about 15 to 20% higher margins compared to third party brands which they would stock in-house. Now reliable products at attractive price points were the ones that drove the purchase intent from the consumer side as well. So a lot of people started picking up stuff because if it was just function, that was the primary intent of these purchases, the basics would actually suffice well enough. And this would work when it came to something like accessories, so cables for charging your phone, little sound boxes, little camera extra accessories, clothing, all of these things, home and kitchen cutlery and various other utilities, these were all something which consumers wanted to buy. They would look well and they would also be priced affordably, and they would give about a 60 to 70% quality when it came to comparison with the top end brands. So if you are not very snooty about the brand you wanted to display, you are good with the kind of quality that you are buying at a lower price. The fun part was for the e-tailer, this was about at a 15 to 20% margin. So it was always profitable for them. Now, in terms of innovative sales events, Myntra did a big fashion gig which had a low discount focus, and their entire shift from deep discounting to premium exclusive offerings showcased them as a stocker of bigger, better and more quality products. So they would stock these kind of products which people would get in a flash and they would not get anywhere else, giving it a certain niche and premium feel. Key features of these were they launched exclusive lines by celebrities so that there was a certain glamour quotient to it, and fashion obviously sells very, very well riding on glamour for sure. So this was there, and never on discount brands were also guaranteed, so that certain people who wanted that kind of badge value and wanted to wear something with a certain snoot angle to it would always go and buy on these brand locations. 35 new brand launches were gotten, including Dorothy Perkins, Aeropostale, Bobbi Brown, etc. And these were high-end international brands which found favor with a certain select kind of value customers instead of making it more massy and more volume. There were certain benefits from this premiumization which helped strengthen their entire positioning that they are top on the fashion ladder. and it attracted both new people, people who wanted to flaunt, and loyal customers who already knew what these brands were about and were happy to have found it in the first place. And there were unique benefits which they wanted and better experiences. This is exactly where the entire offering shifted from a discounting factor to more of a exclusivity, experience based and brand oriented offering. So that shift is something which really pushed up the fashion quotient and the glamour quotient for Flipkart and its subsidiaries like Myntra and Jabong. The premium boosting through margins was something which helped keep more exclusive brands on board, and the premium positioning was kept in the minds of the consumer, and this gave them higher margins because now they were able to charge that kind of extra padded pricing, and this targeted new users while retaining the existing ones. And the broader market impact of it was that the customer preferences were also shifting. Nobody wanted to just be seen in basic cheap clothes. They wanted to be seen in something which has badge value. So premium exclusive offerings were things that people were also focusing towards. And with the slight amount of social showmanship that has now come into our practices in especially the younger audiences, you will see that social media has been a big proponent of trending. And when you're trending, the current campaign which Myntra runs, it says trend IRL. IRL is obviously a new age acronym for in real life. This is typical consumer speak reflected by the brand. So, in this particular way, the brand listened to their consumers. They actually found out what particular forces were driving factors in the market, and they reacted in tune, in time, in sync with whatever forces were moving market considerations, and they became part of the driving force, part of the conversation, and that is extremely important for any brand to hold its own in the market. Now, customer centric strategies, when you compare these two behemoths, Flipkart and Amazon, what they did in their unique own ways was Flipkart prioritized affordability through financing and quality assurance. It also built trust with the exchange programs it ran and exclusive products it kept. Amazon, on the other hand, leveraged its private labels for cost efficiency and customer loyalty, and they had a booming wide range of product categories that enhance the accessibility and purchase intent. So, more things could be bought in a single shot when you landed up on Amazon. So, they were playing these exclusivity versus variety and volume games in their own unique ways, and that is how the positioning also shifted for each of these players. Now, this also helped them drive e-commerce success and also kept them differentiated from each other. Differentiation, again, you will learn later, is something which is critical for the success of any brand narrative. Why? Because as long as you are seen as part of the herd, nobody gives special attention to you. But the moment you start standing apart for a particular purpose, you start resonating with the consumer's thought process, not all, but some. And from those some, if you resonate with them correctly, then they are willing to go the whole hog for buying products from you, because they feel that here is a brand which reflects my tastes, my habits, my ideas, and so therefore I would rather stick with them and be sure and content and satisfied with what they have on offer. It fits my lifestyle, it fills my requirements. So, differentiation strategies where you got exclusive partnerships, premium offerings, this attracted diverse customer segments also, and in terms of market impact, it enhanced the customer experience and it drove the loyalty and actually punched the sales growth upwards. The strategic focus which Flipkart had on private labels at the same point in time kept boosting profitability amongst the fierce competition that they were facing. Now, what is the value this derived in the eyes of customers is also worth noting. Enhancing the customer experience, Flipkart gave themselves a fashion makeover and became the big voice in e-commerce when it came to fashion. And this fashion section revamp, influenced by celebrities, Bollywood, Hollywood and other brand trends, pushed their entire conversation towards the fashion aspect higher and bigger and better. This is something which Amazon has found difficult to dislodge them from. And they have kept their niche very, very clear. They've talked about this in a very, very continuous and very, very decidedly brand narrative kind of way. And here, partnerships with these celebrities, certain TV channels and Bollywood movies has helped push that particular brand saliency out in front of people. So, for fashion, people remember Myntra as the go-to destination when it comes to online purchases. Also, getting personalized outfit curation by a 100-member team of style consultants is something which was a very, very unique niche offering which no other player was doing. So, when you're going online, the ability to try something on new which fits your wardrobe, your style, your look and feel is something which was a great service which people really lapped up, especially the younger generation, which always was with that particular pressure situation which kept them thinking of what to buy, when to buy next, and will it be actually liked by somebody else. So, this we have seen in the campaign also is something which Flipkart capitalized on through Myntra. In terms of technology driving the experience for them, Myntra's physical stores also punched up their overall brand aspects as well. They had private label stores, so they had the Roadster, they had All About You and HRX. So, all these store formats, obviously individually aligned towards different segments, converted into immersive experience zones and certain niche variety of consumers would walk into these stores and experience whatever they wished from there. Again, tech features were introduced. Video walls were one where you can interact with touch sensitive control display showcasing product details, trends, brand stories and whatever else you wanted to dish out at consumers. Again, the touch screen displays actually showed you key looks and you could look at how you would fit within that particular look, and you could also access catalogs from across the store. Again, scan and go, which was a convenience based methodology, helped them add items to the cart via the Myntra app, which would make the Myntra app equally important in their entire purchase habits and consumer journey. This eliminated shopping bags, billing queues and checkout counters, making it absolutely critical as a must have for the consumers because the experience was seamless. And finally, whatever they have tasted, whatever they've seen, whatever they felt adorn them, looking great on them is something they could order. The delivery comes home. You saved the hassle of picking and walking all about in the mall with shopping bags. So, all of these things helped enhance the entire experience for new age savvy consumers. Now, personalized recommendations also formed a lot of the push for online retailers. In fact, Amazon had 70% conversions from there and Flipkart also saw about 67%, which is very close. And users reported relevant suggestions for their products and services, and so therefore, there were chances of more items falling into the cart and finally ending up being purchased. Customer recognition wise, 63% of Amazon and 58% of Flipkart shoppers felt retailers actually understood their preferences. So, they would recommend if you bought a phone, what accessories would go along with it. If you bought a pair of jeans, maybe you could buy a t-shirt, maybe you could buy sneakers, shorts, a shrug, some other adornments, some other extra accessories. You could take a bag maybe for women. So, a variety of things were being offered which were as per what they had currently put into their cart as well as what their earlier purchase trends would have been. So, it would guess what would make them feel good about their entire purchase experience, and that was something critical for retailers to understand and work upon. Again, when it came to customer centric innovations, they had a competitive advantage. What Flipkart did in this particular scenario was they tailored fashion selections and influenced this from extensive consumer research. Our friend we have learnt about in the previous conversations. They also launched style consultants who could work this particular piece out for them and give them that external uh, validation for their choices when it came to fashion. And celebrity partnerships added the glam quotient. It showcased a vibrant shopping experience which consumers, especially the growing young audiences, loved it extremely well. And Myntra added physical stores, redefining them as engaging experience zones and balanced the physical with the digital to make it a hybrid consumer journey. Seamless integration helped the online and offline shopping through technology. We've seen quite a few of the innovations that they brought into play, and all these things helped the consumer also experience uh, online and offline shopping in one particular module, and they helped keep that particular brand in the recall as well as the solution provider for their shopping and fashion needs. Now, in terms of customer engagement and differentiation, the innovative value creation which Flipkart and Myntra did was they leveraged technology and personalization as an experience builder, and that drove customer satisfaction, and they built loyalty from understanding what consumers were about, and they gave them better and sharper personalized experiences and enhanced the brand customer relationships as they went along. In terms of their e-commerce offering, they combined their online convenience with offline experiences and created an impact. So, they had lasting recall of the consumer engagement in consumers' minds. Now, what were the new age challenges which they worked with? Because the times were changing, so they had new age scenarios which they had to deal with. Alexa is something which everybody more or less now is familiar with. Amazon launched the voice revolution and Alexa was at the forefront. So, this empowered developers with chatbot technology to enhance app interactions. Flipkart did something similar called Project Mira. Here, they guided customer searches with conversational filters, offers and trends, and streamlined back-end processes like product classification. So, they would tell you which particular product works for you better, and delivery optimization so that you knew whether you wanted it at home, at office or delivered to a completely new address. Now, in terms of global trends, Amazon and eBay heavily invest in AI. So, Indian e-commerce AI adoption is still evolving because Amazon, as it built its entire engine, it built its web services equally as a strong offering, completely separate from whatever it was doing on its retail format, because they were offering those services as a separate entity as well. Yes, learning from there was also being brought in into play in the retail environment, but it evolved separately as a product offering on its own. Now, in terms of the seller experience, Amazon had great initiatives here. So, this was something that currently even Flipkart is dealing with. Amazon doubled its investment in seller infrastructure. They put up warehouses, fulfillment services and seller cafes. And in their seller network, they grew by a whopping 160% year on year to getting 1.75 lakh sellers on their panel now. And they had vast marketplace inventory. So, they had a lot of things and a lot of product lines which they were offering, and 1.8 lakh products obviously now were available on Amazon's online offering. Flipkart reduced seller fees across categories, discounted its top tier sellers, translating to lower prices and 25% sales jump. And it focused on localized features and inventory management to counter whatever Amazon was doing it at a very large scale level. Now, in terms of customer centric innovations, Flipkart started with 7 AM deliveries so that people who had a busy day would only have that kind of time when they wanted things to be delivered, because after that probably if they headed out to work, they would want the deliveries done and dusted before that. And technician teams came in to reduce smartphone returns, and Amazon Prime on the other hand had unlimited 1 or 2 day deliveries, and Prime Video was given as a little fillip to exclusive content access, and that exclusive content access also was a reason why people switched to Amazon as well. Now, in terms of the future directions, Flipkart is planning to expand into high potential categories like furniture and grocery, whereas they've actually got 9,000 crores from investors like Tencent, eBay and Microsoft. Also, Paytm Mall was one entrant. Now it has moved out of that particular scenario where they were also trying to work on same day delivery and installation services. Nowadays, you will see quick service delivery formats like Zepto and Blinkit, which are running the roost when it comes to 10-minute deliveries. So, the format has been evolving and newer and more sharper, faster, more efficient formats are coming in day by day. So, a lot of players are coming who are trying to divide the pie up. In fact, very recently, Zepto and Blinkit both have gotten into the e-commerce expansion, where beyond groceries, which is what they were servicing, they have now gotten into the electronic space as well. It is very little time before they actually get into the fashion and apparel space as well. Now, in terms of Amazon, they have also started planning a rebuild of their entire brand connection. So, they have done an Indian rebranding where the TV campaigns emphasize asli or original products, and Apni Dukaan, which tries to endear Amazon to India as well and showcase that the sellers on Amazon are people from within India who benefit from the entire thing. Also, visibility wise, Kabaddi League is something which has a grassroots connection. Through that, Amazon has been able to build a better connection now and top of mind recall for its audiences. Amazon Launchpad also exists, which is a support for Indian startups, and it is part of the Startup India entire franchise, and it has a lot of things which new sellers are getting benefits from. Flipkart, because it was locally bred, has that local edge already. That homegrown identity helps them connect with Indian consumers, and they are currently focused on understanding the local needs and preferences, and they are growing in that particular space. The fashion foray keeps them running in the top-notch direction continually. And because of these things, you will also need to measure better, and that is why new metrics are the need of the hour, which is what all retailers and aggregators are currently looking at. Earlier, GMV, which was gross merchandise volume, was something which people used to actually look at to measure success. Now, the innovation, customer engagement and profitability are bigger causes, because the GMV was something which was linked to the money being pumped inside of a system. Over time, as the system matures, you will need it to be self-sustaining, and there innovation comes to your aid, as does consumer engagement, because you don't want to continuously advertise. You want to reduce that particular cost. So, if you have loyalty from your consumer, then the consumer keeps coming back to you of their own volition, which reduces the load on performance marketing. Then, in terms of the future of e-commerce, there is rapid competition which is growing, and technological integration, disruptions, etc., which are coming every day. There is something new which comes up. So, here consumer expectations are also evolving, and that along with marketplace efficiency, because like we've seen, 10-minute deliveries is something which is the next thing. Probably in some time Amazon was touting drone based deliveries. So, we don't know yet which way this will turn, but innovation has a lot of scope for expansion inside of India, and because it is now officially the world's largest consumer market, therefore, the scope of work is immense and the room for innovation is as well. So, with that dynamic e-commerce landscape in mind, movement will have to be AI driven, so that personalization is something which is par for the course. So, you will reshape customer experiences and align them with back-end operations. So, timely, precise deliveries are made. You will empower your sellers, because without them the entire system fails. So, you will expand networks and offer competitive advantages. Localize your strategies, because people in the general local zone want a benefit which is more tailor-made to them. So, you will bring that global expertise you have, but which will have to be peppered with local relevance. And at the end of the day, as a brand which connects with one of the largest, in fact, is the largest population on earth, a nation that has so many mouths to feed, so many bodies to clothe, they are also looking at leaving behind a better world for tomorrow. And as recognition of the same grows, so does consumer awareness and demand for it. That means that you have to also work towards a corporate citizenship format where sustainability, how do you leave behind something which is not wasteful, but something which brings a lot of benefit to the future generations, is also something brands must be very and very starkly aware of. So, hence sustainability becomes a big consideration factor for brands, and creating innovative metrics and solutions for long term growth requires you to think sustainability, circular economies and various other factors. The kind of products you keep, the lower carbon footprint you maintain, etc., are things which will matter for consumers going further. So, in all, we come to a close of this conversation. As you would have seen, Flipkart, yes, homegrown, but it has emerged as a formidable force in India's e-commerce space. They have held their own against a behemoth from international waters, Amazon, and they have blended technological innovation, customer centric strategies, and localized solutions. We have thought of individual consumers in very mom and pop shop ways, but they have also maintained the technological superiority and the premiumness of their offerings, and they have maintained through differentiation that particular competitive edge. And their initiatives like Project Mira and other AI driven personalization, the experience that you get in store, the entire roundabout hybrid shopping experience that they put out, all of these things are enhancing the customer experience and operational efficiency as well. It has got strategic seller friendly measures to keep more people on board, and it focuses on affordable pricing that has strengthened its marketplace dominance. Global players like Amazon are there, and because of their large strength and financial backing, they will always and continually be a threat. So, they will bring in extensive expertise and investments. Flipkart fights, fights this by leveraging its homegrown identity to keep that homeboy advantage going, and it also actually nurtures the deep understanding of local consumer needs to build the necessary emotional connections. By exploring high potential categories, refining its logistics and expanding its private labels, it goes toe to toe with the bigger Goliath of Amazon on the horizon. Flipkart continues to adapt to the dynamic market landscape as competition intensifies. New entrants which have come in, now Paytm Mall has gone out of function, but you've got people like Zepto, you've got people like Blinkit, Lenskart itself. A lot of players come in and they have a lot more new innovations and disruptions which they bring into the market. So, hence it is a continuous standoff between all these players, and Flipkart's continuing challenge lies in maintaining this particular leadership stance that it has, and it has to continue achieving sustainable, profitable growth, because investor money is going to only take you so far. You will have to start earning your own bread and butter and maybe the cheese, icing and cherry on top as well. With all these things, we come to an end of today's conversation and showcase through a particular case study how Flipkart has managed to keep this going for themselves. Next time, we will move further into other aspects of business models which help you understand how particular brands, organizations and even industries are working with models to get viability going for them in marketing sense, and we will discuss it over 3 parts. So, the next part is the first of these 3. That will be the next conversation. Until then, I thank you for being such a lovely audience, and we will see you next time.
Hello and welcome to this piece of literary snippet. We usually know William Shakespeare as the most revered figure in the history of English literature. But we often tend to forget that he has also been one of the most hated figures in literature. And here I'm not talking only about those boys and girls who have to memorize long sections from Macbeth or King Lear or Julius Caesar before they can go and sit for their school or college exams. But I'm also talking about people who are themselves quite famous authors. Tolstoy, for instance, considered the writings of Shakespeare to be, and I quote, crude, immoral, vulgar, and senseless. George Bernard Shaw absolutely loathed Shakespeare, as he did Homer. But perhaps no other criticism about Shakespeare is more damaging than the one which says that Shakespeare is a marvelous storyteller, provided someone has told him the story earlier. Now, this piece of criticism is particularly damaging because it is true. None of Shakespeare's plays contain any original story whatsoever. They are all written using pre-existing materials, pre-existing stories. Now, does that diminish the stature of Shakespeare as a dramatist? Well, I'll leave that for you to decide. See you in the next episode of Literary Snippets.